The Beasley Allen Report, brought to you by one of the most successful personal injury firms in the nation, the Beasley Allen Law Firm, founded by former Alabama Lieutenant Governor Jerry Beasley, and hosted by Gibson Vance, past president of the American Association for Justice and a partner in the Beasley Allen Law Firm. This is the Beasley Allen Report. Here is your host, Gibson Vance.
Welcome to the Beasley Allen Report. Tonight I welcome my special guest, Alabama State Senator Cam Ward. Senator Cam Ward began his political career in 2002 when he was elected to the House of Representatives. And in 2010 he was elected to serve as a state senator. Part of his duties include his work as co-chair of the State Judiciary Committee. Tonight we'll discuss Senator Ward's work on that committee as well as other issues facing our state. Senator Ward, welcome to the Beasley Allen Report.
Thanks for having me on, Gibson.
Well, I was so excited that you agreed to be our guest. I've known you for several years. I've admired the work you did in the House of Representatives. Then you got elected to the State Senate, where you're serving as co-chair of the Judiciary Committee, which in my opinion is one of the most important committees, and I think you're doing a great job.
Well, I appreciate it. It sure is a lot of work, but I really enjoyed it. Some people would say it was a demotion to the Senate from the House, but I like to think of it as a promotion.
Well, it seems like you've been there a long time. I know this
it feels like it. It's my second session in the Senate. It feels like a long time.
Well, you know, to our viewers, explain exactly what the committee, the Judiciary Committee, does.
It actually probably handles more pieces of legislation than all the other committees combined. It oversees everything, you know, from tort and litigation issues to criminal law, any kind of new crimes being created. It all goes through that committee, the court system. So it's what we call a heavy lifting committee. It has a very active agenda every single week.
There's no doubt about it. And to put it really in simple terms, what you do in your committee is you make law. I mean, you look at the criminal law, you look at the civil law, any changes, any new laws that we do, your committee, which you chair, decides on what's going to pass and what's not going to pass, and then once the full Senate and House votes on it and the governor approves it, it becomes law.
It's a very thorough working committee. That's where most of your attorneys serve. You know, only 10% of the legislature are actually attorneys. Wow. And almost all of them do serve on that committee, which is good. It's good to have attorneys looking at some of these complex issues.
And we were talking about our good friend, Senator Dick Brubaker, who's not an attorney, and he's been on this show, but he serves on your committee.
He's one of the only non-attorneys on that committee, but he has a great deal of insight to the deliberations, I should say.
Right. And Cam, of course, you went to Troy.
Yes.
We're fellow Troy graduates, and you were SGA president, weren't you?
I was SGA president twice at Troy, so yes, wow. I'm a big Trojan fan, absolutely.
You had a little bit more successful career at Troy than I did. Where did you go to law school?
Cumberland. I went to Cumberland, Birmingham.
And what type of law do you practice?
Primarily contract and municipal law now. At one time I actually did criminal law, and just kind of over the years as I got more and more in politics, you didn't have as much time to do the kind of practice that you wanted to, so that's how I moved more into the municipal and contract law.
Well, it's a full-time job serving in the state Senate. Some people don't understand that, but when you're chair of a committee like the Judiciary Committee, you're doing some work year-round, and I know it's difficult to balance that with your law practice. And you're married and you have one child?
Yes, one child, one daughter. That part-time job can get busy really quick. So yes, you're exactly right. And Judiciary is the hardest working committee I serve on. I serve on about 7 committees, but hands down, that one takes the most of my time.
Well, I know you don't want to talk about it today, but my opinion and the opinion of a lot of people that watch the legislature, you're a rising star, and you're young, and there's no telling what your career may lead you to in politics.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I hope my colleagues feel the same way as we start getting a little more active with the rest of our agenda this session.
Well, you started in 2002 in the House. How old were you?
I did. I was 30 years old at the time when I started in the House. At the time, I was the youngest in the legislature for that time. And then I served 2 terms, 8 years, and then was elected to the Senate upon Senator Hank Irwin retiring from the legislature.
Well, we're going to talk about 2 issues that are near and dear to your heart, two things you're working on. The first of which is our prison system. We were talking before the show started, and you made a good point. A lot of times our citizens don't put that much thought into the prison system, but that can be a problem.
It's a real problem. You know, prisons are nothing that, no one ever sits around and goes, boy, it's good politics to help prisons. It's just not. I mean, it's not an issue that's on the top of anyone's mind. However, if you look at California's recent Supreme Court case, or the Supreme Court case dealing with California, where that system was deemed to be unconstitutional and forced to release 30,000 inmates, cost California hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's all because they're at 180% capacity in the prisons. We're at 193% capacity.
Wow.
And pushing at 200% now.
Well, to put that in perspective, apparently when they they build these prisons, they plan on X number of prisoners being there.
Correct.
And we're getting close to double the number of prisoners?
We're getting close to double the number that our facilities can hold. And of course, we can't afford to build any more facilities.
Right.
So what do you do with all these inmates? If the courts ever came in and took over, it'd be the largest federal intervention in our state's history.
Well, I know we have a graphic to kind of show the overcrowding that we're talking about. There have been states, such as California, where the federal government comes in and says, you're not taking care of your prison system or health care system or mental health system, and we're going to take over. Explain exactly how that would work.
What happens is you get sued for what they call unconstitutional conditions, these overcrowding conditions, or lack of health care coverage. And what happens, basically, you go to federal court, and the court says, you know what, you're right. These prison facilities do not meet constitutional standards, so you're going to release X number of inmates, and we're going to fine you X number of hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. And with the general fund budget that's already seeing a reduction of $500 million or more this year, how would we ever pay for that without risking some sort of danger to public safety?
Well, our viewers may be saying, how did we get in this situation?
Well, I'll tell you how we got into it, and the legislature, which I serve in, is partially to blame. We've kicked this can down the road because it's not politically popular to take on an issue like how do you change our sentencing guidelines. That's not popular. People aren't clamoring for it, but if people knew the dangers of what lies out there if we don't fix it, I think a lot more people would be interested in seeing us get something done.
Well, we're going to do that over the next 30 minutes. We're going to expose really what's going on in the prison system, and then we're going to talk about solutions that you've come up with, and I think our viewers will find this very interesting. You're watching the Beasley Allen Report. We've got more with Alabama State Senator Cam Ward coming up after this break.
The Beasley Allen Law Firm, helping those who need it most since 1979.
It's a very, very encouraging thing to look back on a case and see the work that you've done made a true difference. I was a young boy who had gotten hit in the head with an airbag, and he lost use of his arm completely. The little boy also lost use of his legs because of the spinal cord injury. And we were able to get him help that he needed to see the right doctors and get the right kind of care through that litigation, that I went and watched him play baseball. And if we hadn't have pursued that case, he would have never gotten that treatment. There's very few occasions when I'm not working on a case that the worst thing that has ever happened in their life didn't just happen. We then have the opportunity to help them when they need it the most. And that is the sole reason I do this. And I get to see people every day's lives get changed for the better by our helping them.
Helping those who need it most since 1979. At Beasley Allen, our motto says it all. We not only serve others in the courtroom, but through our cases, we make a difference for people throughout the country. Our victories often result in corporations creating safer workplaces and manufacturers making safety changes in their products. The Beasley Allen attorneys, investigators, and support staff work together to find the hidden cause behind an accident or injury. See how Beasley Allen has been helping others at BeasleyAllen.com.
The Beasley Allen Report, brought to you by one of the most successful personal injury firms in the nation, the Beasley Allen Law Firm, founded by former Alabama Lieutenant Governor Jerry Beasley, and hosted by Gibson Vance, past president of the American Association for Justice and a partner in the Beasley Allen Law Firm. This is the Beasley Allen Report. Here is your host, Gibson Vance.
Welcome back to the Beasley Allen Report. Tonight my guest is Alabama State Senator Cam Ward. We're talking about prisons. We're talking specifically about prisons being overcrowded. Well, where can felons go once they're convicted?
Well, basically you only have a few choices. Either you can go to a state prison, assuming it's state law, not federal law, or you can go to a county jail. I mean, right now you have very few options. We've developed a system that's lock them up and throw away the key. So there's not a lot of options right now, Gibson.
Well, what are the fixes?
Well, the fixes are simple. Close to 70% of all new inmates going into the system are your nonviolent offenders. Those who what I often call are committing crimes against themselves, drugs, alcohol, and that sort of stuff. That's where your fix comes in at. You've got to start using more alternative sentencing programs. Texas has done it, Kentucky's done it, South Carolina, other conservative states that look at these alternative sentencing programs. You start shifting those nonviolent folks into those programs and away from our brick and mortar prisons.
Well, I know you, and I know your philosophy, and you are certainly tough on crime. You're never going to be soft on crime, but we can't sustain these numbers. So what are some of the things we can do with the non-violent offenders? Well,
for example, you see creative programs out there such as drug courts that basically say, look, we're going to let you stay on parole, or we're going to put you in some sort of work release program, but you're going to get randomly drug tested. You're going to help pay for your rehabilitation that you go through. That's a great way not only to make sure that someone's being punished for the crime they commit, but also they don't come back into the system again. And that's what you want, because at the end of the day, what all of our goal is, make sure public safety is number one. Keep the violent folks locked up longer, and this is the way you fix that, is deal with the nonviolent offenders.
Right, and your point is if we don't react soon, the federal government's going to come in and say, you've got to cut X number.
Indiscriminately, that's right. And what we don't want is, we don't want any kind of mass release. What we want is start coming up with programs that are smarter on crime, that are right on crime, and these are the ways to do that. Community corrections is another great example.
Well, you know, you talk about these people that have drug problems, and they are crimes on themselves, but those lead to breaking in and stealing stuff. But the way you fix that is not just put them in jail. You have to help them with their problems, or as soon as they get out, they're going to go right back to their old ways.
If you look at Virginia, Texas, some of these other states that have taken on sentencing reform like I'm talking about, their prison population declined, while at the same time they saw no increase in crime. So it does work. We just have to be brave enough as politicians to take it on.
Well, how much are we spending? How much is the state of Alabama spending in its general fund budget for prisons?
We're going to get close to 30% before long.
Well, let's put that in perspective. And if you would, just give us a brief explanation of how the general fund works. I think we're going to have a graphic that shows how much we're spending.
We right now spend roughly about $1.75, $1.76 billion in our general fund. You have two budgets in Alabama, education, general fund. General fund represents about 20% of all tax dollars. Well, if you take that $1.76 billion budget and subtract 25-30% from it, that's $300 million, $400 million. We just can't afford to keep sustaining that pace, and it's gone up every year just to keep level with what we're doing now.
Right, which, as we've said a couple of times, is we're way over occupation as it is. Well, as it relates to the general fund, we've all heard about the problems with the money in Alabama, the fact that we don't have as much money as we need to fund the government, the fact that we may have to cut some basic services 30 or 40%. A big part of that appears to be what we're spending on prison.
If we're not careful, what we're going to have is a general fund that does nothing but fund prisons and Medicaid, because those are the two fastest growing parts of the general fund budget. We can't sustain that, and the taxpayers, in my opinion, should demand better services from the state. And the way they can get better services is if we reform and get the cost of the prison system under control. That's how we get there.
Well, let's talk about some services that we'll have to cut even more if we can't fix this problem.
Oh, goodness gracious, the one that comes to mind the most, two that come to mind most for me is mental health services, right, and two, public health. Public health is everything from child nutrition to what about, to be honest with you, food inspections. Things right that we take for granted that would be there would have to be drastically reduced.
I was at the state legislature a couple of weeks ago, and the mental health associations were holding a rally. And it really put it in perspective. I mean, those are services that we can, as good people, we can't cut.
There are so many disabled people out there in Alabama, truly disabled, whether mentally or physically, that depend on certain services in government. And to say that we're going to slash 40% for the sake of keeping prison systems just the way they are, well, that's not good leadership on our part in the legislature.
Well, what would you say to people that may oppose what you're trying to do and call it being soft on crime?
People like to say soft on crime, and that sounds good politically, but at the end of the day, it's smarter on crime. We can be smarter about it. Conservative legislatures all over the country have done this. And I would say this, I'd rather have a system that locks somebody up who's violent for a longer period of time, while at the same time making sure those who are nonviolent aren't repeat offenders. And the way to do that is look at smart alternative sentencing guidelines.
Well, that's exactly right. And what would those alternative guidelines be?
Well, a good example being, instead of saying, you know what, you got caught with a DUI, minor theft, and then some sort of a bag of pot, and suddenly you're hitting 3 strikes and you're out, and you're going to start going away for life in prison. Why not look at programs like, hey, you're going to go to drug court? Why not go to community corrections where you have to work, you have to pay for your restitution, you have to pay for your drug rehabilitation? All that prevents you from going in to begin with, but you're still being punished. I mean, those are programs that truly work in our system. I just don't think we utilize them enough.
I bet most of our viewers do not understand the 3-strike system. Explain that.
Well, right now, if you commit 3 felonies, which I'm going to simplify it here, but if you commit 3 felonies, that's 3 strikes and you're out. You go away to life in prison.
And those 3 felonies could all be nonviolent
They could all be
offenses.
nonviolent. You could be a complete nonviolent offender but spend life in prison, which is, it sounds good to the politicians who want to campaign on it, but it creates a very, very broken system, and it creates a financial burden on our state, and the legal, law-abiding citizens shouldn't have to deal with that burden.
And not to ask you to pull this off the top of your head, but if you have somebody that's 22 years of age that is going away to prison for life because they broke into 3 different cars, and not to minimize that, they ought to be punished, but
Sure.
we need to rehabilitate them, not just incarcerate them. And let's say the average life expectancy is 72, so they're in prison for 50 years, and we're paying for it.
We're paying for it, and like you said, they should be punished. We all agree on that. There's no question on that. I think it's the method in which we're punishing them. And for these people who say, well, if we just locked them up and threw away the key, that'll teach them a lesson. Well, statistics are showing it's not teaching them a lesson, and that it's not working, and that it's actually causing the opposite effect. When they get out, they're actually a criminal with a master's degree is what it is. So we've got to be smarter about this. And this is the sentencing guidelines are the way to do it. But you know what I like, Gibson? Look at community corrections. It costs you $17 a day to put an inmate in there. Right now it costs us $42 a day to keep an inmate locked up behind brick and mortar.
3 times as much. And let's talk about the employees of the prison system. You were telling me on the break that you've seen prisons where there are 200 inmates to every guard.
Scary. I toured St. Clair County Correctional Facility, and one of the biggest frightening, most eye-opening experiences I ever had was I saw one guard out on a yard where 200 inmates were wandering around. That's an unarmed guard who's making $25,000 a year guarding 200 inmates. That young man's going to lose his life one day because he's in an overcrowded situation that we're doing nothing about.
Well, I guess we're 2 or 3 minutes before our last break. What would you, in a nutshell, do to fix this system?
In the state of Virginia, what they did was, it was very creative. We have a sentencing commission in place. In Virginia, they gave the power to create the sentencing guidelines or develop sentencing guidelines to the sentencing commission. Guidelines for just your nonviolent offenses. Those guidelines were developed by the commission. They're required to report them to the legislature. They go into effect unless we expressly reject those recommendations. That keeps the idea of the debate of strong on crime, soft on crime, out of the legislature, out of the politics, but at the same time allows us to have oversight as to what those guidelines are going to be. It's worked very well in Virginia, and I think we can do it here in Alabama too.
And you know, Virginia is a moderate state. I mean,
yeah, it is, and quite honestly, it was a Republican legislature, Republican Attorney General who proposed it, and it worked very well.
Well, Cam, or Senator Ward, I commend you for this because it takes guts to step out there, recognize what the problem is, and try to find a way to resolve it because, as we said earlier, we don't think about it as much as average citizens, but when they start cutting the budget even more on mental health and basic health care needs, it's really going to take a toll.
Absolutely, and we were elected to make some tough decisions, and everyone says that all the time. Of course, everyone wants to make the tough decisions when it's politically popular too. Right. And this is not going to be necessarily politically popular, but I think it's probably one of the most necessary changes that we could possibly make in the legislature.
Are you getting support from your caucus members?
I am. More and more people have seen the crisis that's coming ahead, and I think we all see it like a big tsunami on the horizon. So I think a lot more people are stepping up and are going to be supportive.
Well, how about the governors? Is the governor supportive?
The governor's been very supportive, and I appreciate them and their dialogue they've had with me and suggestions they've made in drafting the bill that we have coming forward.
Attorney General?
Attorney General's been very supportive. We've been working with district attorneys, victims' rights advocates, judges. I mean, we've had a broad-based coalition going forward, and everyone won't be completely happy with it, But I think at the end of the day, we'll say, wow, we made real progress with passing this bill.
I guarantee you our circuit judges, which we're in front of all the time, understand
they understand it
as well as
completely.
anybody.
Yeah, they do, and they've been very supportive and giving me some of their candid thoughts on it, and I really appreciate them.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be a good idea to give the judges that we elect a little bit more flexibility on the sentencing?
Absolutely, and you know, right now too, oftentimes we impose certain things on our judges we shouldn't impose, and I think that creates part of the problem too, because we're trying to legislate. People talking about legislating from the bench.
Right.
Well, sometimes we try to judge from the legislature.
Right.
We could probably do a little bit less of that as well too.
Well, I know that you probably feel the same way. We've got some great circuit judges, and we just need to let them do their job.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the prison system. We've tackled that. We're going to take a short break, and after that we're going to talk about cyber crimes, which I think you also find very interesting, so stay with us. We'll be right back after this very short break.
The Beasley Allen Law Firm, helping those who need it most since 1979.
Kubota now has rock protection of all their tractors. Car manufacturers make their roofs safer. They make their seat belts safer, their airbags safer. Whatever the product may be that we have had a cause to prosecute that case on a client's behalf, we know that, at least for that particular case, that person's life changes. But most of the time, the manufacturer of that product will go back and say, okay, you know what, they were right. For me personally, it means not just knowing that products are made safer, but knowing that I have a part to play in that process. In every case that we have, we're usually dealing with a family that has lost a loved one forever. Or we're dealing with a person who is either paralyzed or lost a limb, and they're not sure how they're going to survive from that day forward. So we help them get their lives back together so they can survive.
Helping those who need it most since 1979. The Beasley Allen motto not only applies to the clients we serve, but also to our community. With an award-winning website at BeasleyAllen.com, the firm provides up-to-the-minute information about consumer issues, including recalls, alerts, and other public safety updates. Potential clients learn more about issues related to their case and gain direct access to our attorneys. See how Beasley Allen has been helping others at BeasleyAllen.com.
No one did. Welcome back to the Beasley Allen Report. Once again, my guest is my good friend, Alabama State Senator Cam Ward. We've talked about the prison systems, and I think you've convinced us that something has to change before the federal government steps in. But another project you're working on is cyber crimes.
Yes.
Explain that.
You know, when we talked about theft, it was at gunpoint. And today, theft can easily occur by a keyboard. Right. And what's happened is Alabama's laws dealing with computer-related crimes have not been updated since 1985. When we think about 1985, we all played Atari, and computers that have as much power as my iPhone
Sure.
were as big as this room. So
Sure.
that's how out of date our laws are. So what we're doing is we're looking at new terminology that never existed back in the 1980s. Terms like phishing, terms like bots, viruses that get on our computers. What we're going to try to do is use our theft laws to go after criminals who do these crimes. They just engage on a keyboard as opposed to holding you up with a gun.
Well, let's talk about them. What is phishing, by the way?
Good example, someone puts a virus or puts something on your computer or cons you into responding into an email with your personal information. What they're doing is basically data collecting. They're trying to collect data from you and use that data in a malicious way. Often this happens quite a bit with email scams. This happens a lot when viruses are put on your computer and act as like a Trojan horse to steal your information, and then basically you're robbed. You know, you can have your bank account, credit cards emptied based upon these simple viruses they put on your computers.
Have we caught anybody in Alabama doing that yet?
Oh, people get caught all the time. Yeah, it's a very, very common thing. But the big problem we have is right now is where does the case get held at when you catch somebody? There's a lot of questions. What if someone's in Chicago and they break into my computer here in Montgomery? Where do you try the case at? There's a big venue issue. So one of the things this bill does is it reaches out and grabs them. It allows you to have venue here in our courts, here in wherever the crime or the victim was at.
Right. Wow. I guess it's something that if we, 1985, as you said, it's a long time ago. It's way before everybody had all these computer accounts and everybody operates on computers. Most people buy a majority of their items off of the computer.
Absolutely. You know, Alabama also ranks 12th in the country for ID theft.
Wow.
And almost all that identification theft always occurs online. So yes, it is a real problem.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, what we're going to do is, one, we're going to get some real teeth for our prosecutors to go after. Our attorney general and prosecutors want to be able to reach out and grab these people and have them try them here in Alabama. Two, technology exists. It exists already, and we have it. The problem we have is applying the current 1985 law to these crimes that are being committed today. With the capability we have to track down who's engaging in these phishing or who's engaging in these viral scams, we can go out and get them. We just got to have the laws updated to do that.
You'll get this passed, won't you?
We'll get this passed. I feel very confident. We've had a lot of input. The prosecutors in this state, the DAs, have been very involved. We've actually had some input from the federal side as well, because the federal government currently has a federal law in place that deals with some of the online crimes being committed.
Well, let's pivot. We have 2 or 3 minutes
Sure.
left. What other issues do you see that we need to face quickly operating in the state? What's going on?
Well, obviously the biggest thing we have is the general fund budget.
Right.
I mean, hands down, everything else we do is going to somehow, some way come back to the general fund. And what concerns me the most is the courts, because our court system is overtaxed. The dockets are getting longer and longer and longer. Cases are taking longer and longer to deal with. We have to come up with some ways, creative solutions, so that our court system just doesn't shut down altogether. In some states, you've seen like Connecticut, where they would go to like a 4-day work week. That'd be a disaster for our court system, because people's day in court, or the justice they deserve, just gets pushed further and further out as these shortfalls continue.
Right. I mean, we have to fund that branch of the government, because if you don't, you'll have chaos. I look oftentimes to see who's filed lawsuits. A lot of times it's a business filing a lawsuit to collect money. It's businesses suing other businesses. It's individuals suing to get property back, because if you don't have this mechanism where people can resolve civil disputes, there'll be problems on the street.
Absolutely. One solution Texas came with that I'm looking at as well is they basically took several several litigation cases where the total amount being sought was under $100,000, and allowed you to expedite those cases so they can be heard a lot quicker. You're shortening the discovery period. So things like that, which help us move these cases along, help that docket speed up. Anything we can do to help, I think it's a big deal for our courts.
How's that bill going? I think
it's going really well. I think
bill.
it'll move. I think we'll pass it over to the legislature, in addition to my private judge bill, which basically just says if you and I have a dispute and we agree that we'll both pay the judge together, we can have our case heard immediately by a retired circuit judge who has at least 6 years experience on the bench. That bill as well is going to move too.
And that would be a non-jury
That's
type
exactly
situation.
right. That's exactly right. Usually it's business on business, as you said.
Right. Well, I think that's a great idea. I mean,
anything we do to be creative, we have to.
The system has to continue to flow.
Absolutely.
What do you see going forward in your career?
Oh, goodness. This session's been busy. I have, today actually, I dropped in my 30th legislative bill today. Wow. And this was, I guess I don't say no as much as I should to people who ask me to handle bills for them. I think I'm going to have a very busy next 2 or 3 years. I hope to hopefully be allowed to serve in the Senate again. I don't know, maybe if my district feels that way, depends on redistricting as well. But I think right now I'm really going to focus hard on what I'm doing with Senate Judiciary. I enjoy that role tremendously, and hopefully the next 2 years will show that in my work.
Well, you've done a great job. In my opinion, you're one of the stars in the Senate, and you're going to have a bright future for many, many years to come in whatever you do, and I'm proud to call you a friend, and I just appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Gibson.
Well, that's all we have. We appreciate the Senator joining us tonight. You can catch the Beasley Allen Report on Sunday nights after the 10 o'clock news, and on Monday nights after the news at 9 on the Bounce Network. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can email me at gibson@beasleyallen.com. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.